So in this video, we're going to talk about what a microspeaker is and how it works. So what is a microspeaker? Before we get into that, maybe we should talk about what a speaker is. A speaker is a device that basically creates sound waves. And a speaker itself consists of three basic components. The diaphragm itself, that's the part that's actually moving and creating the pressure waves. And then two more components which actually creates the motion of that diaphragm. And those two components are a coil, a voice coil, a coil of wire, and a magnet. So that coil of wire has electrical current that runs through it that makes an electromagnet that pushes and pulls against a fixed magnet. That creates the motion. So three basic components in a speaker. What is a microspeaker? A microspeaker is essentially the same type of thing. There's three basic components, the same three basic components, but much simpler construction, because the speaker itself is much more than a typical speaker that you'd find in your home theater or home stereo system. A microspeaker is very small, and so it has more mechanical constraints, if you will. So it's a much more simpler construction. But again, the same three components: a diaphragm, a voice coil, and a magnet. This shows a picture of a typical microspeaker, which is what was similar to what we have here on the EV kit, against a typical home theater speaker. So you get an idea for the size and how much smaller they are. Typically, they're in the order of about 1 inch or maybe 2 or 3 centimeters size for microspeakers. Since microspeakers are so much smaller, they have much limited capability, so they cannot reproduce as low frequencies as the typical speakers, and they cannot produce as much sound pressure waves either. So a good way to think of a microspeaker is it's basically the same thing as like a baby tweeter, if you will. Like in home theater speakers, you have these three different types of speakers: a tweeter, a mid-range, and a woofer. A microspeaker is along the lines of a tweeter, same size. So the way a speaker works, again, is the diaphragm that's moving. It's creating pressure waves, sound pressure waves in front. However, the diaphragm is moving, so it's actually creating the same waves behind the diaphragm as well too. So while it's pushing, the other side is actually pulling, so it's creating opposite waves on the backside of the driver. And because of that reason, you need to put a speaker inside a box. So if the speaker is by itself, if the speaker driver is by itself, then the front waves and the back waves are actually allowed to cancel, because the back waves themselves it's not separated from the front, and they can go around and they can cancel out, and then the end result is not very good quality sound. So for that reason, you put the speakers in a box themselves, and that separates the front wave from the back wave, which gives you much better sound. However, it must be noted that in particular microspeakers, typically the design of the device, the form factor, basically dictates the size of the box itself that the microspeaker goes into, and that affects the performance and the response. So if you were to look at what's inside a microspeaker, if you actually tear it down, you'll see what's happening. This is a picture of a speaker in a box itself, a microspeaker. If you crack open that box, you can see the microspeaker driver, which again is the diaphragm, the coil, and the magnet. And if you take that driver out of that box, and you tear that driver open, you can basically see that there's a coil wire, a very thin wire, much thinner than a typical home theater speaker, and a very small magnet. And if you continue to tear it apart even more, you'll see the voice coil and then the diaphragm itself. Again, a microspeaker is much smaller than a regular speaker, but the same three components. Why don't we take the speaker from our EV kit and tear that open so we can show you real time. Let's pull this off. The speaker right now is mounted with putty on the board. We can disconnect the wires. And then let's crack this open. So let's remove the putty. The putty is there to prevent vibrations when it's playing. So I'll take a screwdriver and we'll crack open the box itself. So what you have here is, this is a microspeaker diaphragm, and this is the box itself, the enclosure, again separating the front from the back waves. And if you tear it open, you can see the speaker driver inside here. Now you can take the driver and pull that out. Let's remove that from the box front. And here you see, this is the magnet, and inside here is the diaphragm and the voice coil. So the diaphragm itself is really thin. It's made out of plastic, and in this case it's reinforced with a really thin piece of metal. And the coil itself is a very thin wire. And that's one of the reasons why thermal protection is very important for microspeakers. And the diaphragm itself is made out of a very thin material, typically a PEK type of plastic. And that's also very susceptible to damage if the diaphragm moves too far for overexcursion. So there you have it. Those are the components of a microspeaker. And so now you know all about microspeakers. Thanks for watching.